So I was looking to come back to this comment and find it, and I've actually got something to say about it to this Robert Clark guy. It was actually, I've just found it now. It was on one of the Big Brother Watch pages. I thought it was in one of the other groups, but just in one of the get Starmer out groups or general political groups. But it's actually on the Big Brother Watch page. So this is Robert Clark. Robert, this is my personal reply to you, and I'll probably click on your. I'll actually click on your profile and see if I can messenger you it, but I'll put it here anyway. Oh no, actually I can't, because Silky Carla doesn't have a setting so you can put pictures or video replies. I can probably put a link if I put it on YouTube. I'll actually put it on my channel. I can put the link to my channel anyway, but I'll tag you. So anyway, so this is what Robert Clark says. Do people not realise that all MPs are representatives and not delegates? So vote the way their party wants, not the way their constituents want. That is why it is a big thing when they vote against their party wants. Well, yeah, because Keir Starmer, he's been known for saying, if any of his Labour Party members vote the opposite way, he threatens, to kick them out of the party and that they'll never stand for Labour again and all this, right? Well, this is the thing. Robert Clark, get the standing orders of Parliament. The standing orders of Parliament is the law of Parliament, right? You tell me what act of law says that an MP is a representative or a delegate, right? What legislation or act are you referring to, right? Now, Parliament isn't governed by the common law, right? It's governed by the law of Parliament, parliamentary law. And the only real true law is standing orders and any acts of law that govern Parliament or MPs specifically, right? Because some of them, they're not allowed to use privileges, right? Now, firstly, there's a lot of policy being made up by MPs, and some of it actually it can't be lawful. It actually goes against the grain of the standing orders. In fact, for example, the most important and primary example of this is currently with the e-petitions team, which is an absolute nightmare. The policy is only signed by 2 MPs, right? And it tells, the staff not to ask any questions or answer any questions or engage with the petitioner when they're assessing their petition before they reject it, right? Yet, the whole point of Standing Orders 145A3 is that the committee is given powers in order for them to summon people and call for documents so they can understand a petition, right? Specifically to understand a petition. Now, the prima facie first witness you'd call to understand a petition is the person who wrote it, right? And so the policy is trying to tell them not to do that. So they've already become corrupt. They're putting policy through that is against standing orders of Parliament, right? Now, the policy, read the HC235 paper, right, which is basically about e-petitions and various other committee reports when they create e-petitions. If you've just got the leader of the House of Commons and the leader of the chair of the e-petitions committee, and they both cobble together some rules and they both sign it, right? What they're doing is they themselves are agreeing that they personally will follow those rules, and they're making their staff comply with those rules and us, but it's not law. And it isn't standing orders that the House have voted on. And if they go against standing orders, right, the MPs are allowed to suspend any rule, right? The MPs can suspend any rule of Parliament, but to do that, they've officially got to suspend the rule, right? They've officially got to vote on it and suspend the rule. Now, the e-petitions policy is not all MPs voting to suspend rules and making an official declaration that we're suspending the rules like we're suspending standing orders of the petitions committee, right? It's not. It's just like, the leader of the House of Commons and Jamie Stone, cobbling together their own little thing and signing it and saying, "Oh, we're going to do this," and trying to get their own staff to agree to it and trying to get us to comply with it, right? When petitioning. So look, the only law in Parliament is standing orders. Now, if you search standing orders for the word whip, doesn't exist. The word whip does not appear or exist in the standing orders of Parliament. And I'm not sure that I've seen it in the Manual of Procedure in the Public Business. I've got a few volumes of the Manual of Procedure in Public Business on my shelf. I don't remember seeing whips in there, and I'm not too sure whether whips are mentioned in Erskine May. But what I can do is actually, I'm going to press pause. I'm going to go over to my bookshelf. I'm going to get Erskine May volume out, and I'm going to go into the back of the book, and I'm going to look to see if it contains, in the bibliography or vocabulary, if it contains the word whip. So hold on a second. Right. So it does have whips in Erskine May. There are sections on whips. Now, firstly, Erskine May is not the law of Parliament, right? You might say that it's the traditions and customs of Parliament, but it's not law. It isn't standing orders, and it's not legislation, and it's written by a clerk. And Erskine May is only the knowledge and advice of a clerk. Now, no elected MP who has judicial powers has to do what the clerk says or agree with them. They can challenge or disagree the clerk. And if they want to act and do something to the House, it's always on the vote of MPs or the debate of MPs. And if you ignore the clerk and say, well, I'm going to put it to the House anyway, right, then you can disagree with the clerk and you can put it to the House. And if you can persuade other MPs to agree with you, then they can do it. Because remember, they can vote to suspend any rule, right? But they're not standing orders. Standing orders are the rules, right? Not Erskine May. It's the advice of a clerk. Now, you might say, well, what are the customs and the customs and traditions of Parliament? Well, the customs and traditions of Parliament, if, for example, in petitions, if you read the 1832 petitions report, are very different to what Erskine May is saying in 1844. When he starts doing his books, and then other clerks are editing and changing it. So it's like an evolving, you've got a constantly evolving customs and practices, but none of those are the law, because standing orders are the law of Parliament, right? And the legislation and acts. Now, there are acts of law which form and create the government. And those acts of law have to be complied with by MPs and the government, and they're very wrong if they think that they don't have to obey the law. They can suspend rules of Parliament, like standing orders, but they swear an oath. They are sworn in to act according to law, right? So when we petition Parliament, right, we are using the 1368 observation of due process of law, which is the right of the community to assemble for redress of grievances and put it in a matter of writ and record to complain to the King or Parliament. And that is updated with the 1688 Bill of Rights, which says that you cannot be prosecuted for doing it, right? You cannot be criminally liable by a prosecutor for your proceedings, messing civil processes, right? You're protected, okay? Or protected from the courts. You're only answerable to Parliament, but it's questionable if something was legitimately done in pursuit of your case, like, police pursuing their work, then you can argue that, it's justifiable action, right? In fact, it's possible that petitioners have got more protection than MPs, right? Because the illegal prosecutions by the King's Bench for matters decidable, it's matters and causes that are decidable in Parliament, and you're not meant to be liable for misdemeanours in the pursuit of that, but you can be prosecuted for felony or treason, right? But obviously, you can't be prosecuted for felony or treason against the King anymore because he was calling up the Star Chamber and, getting people executed and all manner of kinds of stuff for what the things they were pursuing in their petition cases as well, right? Not just the actions they were performing to get their evidence or canvass them, actually for the subject matter, right? They were getting prosecuted for the subject matter, but not in the local common police courts and not in the assizes. Actually in the king himself, right? In these courts of Royal Commission or Star Chamber or the King's Bench in Westminster Hall, right? Because that case was to the king anyway, remember. If you've got a case to the king, it's not to any other courts, so you're not liable to any of those courts anyway. But people were getting prosecuted by the king just for bringing these cases, right? Like, challenging religion or whatever, right? Religious beliefs and so forth. Now, we cannot be prosecuted by the king. We cannot be prosecuted by the king for bringing a subject, any subject, right? So now, if you do it by matter of written record, officially tell the king to go fuck himself, right? And that's just like a joke, I'm just an example. I'm not telling the king to go fuck himself, but that's an example. It's a joke, right? You can't be prosecuted for that, for treason, felony, because it's in a petition and you're doing it by official matter of record and writ. If you do not use that process, and if you try to, overpower the government or take over it by force without using due lawful process, then you're committing treason, or sedition and all that type of stuff, right? But we're allowed to. This is why, Republic are allowed to, do the, Not My King campaign and so forth, right? Now, those are acts of law. Now, Parliament can repeal acts of law, and it's debatable and arguable whether they can, which statutes they can change and repeal. Like a lot of Magna Carta has been repealed. There's an argument about that. They've been creating making election petitions into the court's jurisdiction when it was privileged to Parliament. That's a new privilege. And it's unaffordable now. People can't afford to challenge it. They try to bankrupt people when they challenge it. And elections ought to be free, the whole process is. So some of the acts of law go against the law. And this is what they do with the European Convention of Human Rights. They're like, you can say incompatibility with a convention right, but this is like incompatibility with the Constitution, right? Some of these acts are incompatible with the Constitution. And you need to call them, this is what you complain about grievances about with the government, right? Legislation is meant to be compatible, right? Now, statutes and laws are meant to, be changed, but we're meant to be defending and protecting the Constitution, amending and strengthening the laws, right? Not weakening them and breaking them down, right? They evolve and develop, but to strengthen the general principles, because the general principles were meant to be virtuous, right? Or meant to be, righteous from the start. That's the whole point, but there's room for improvement, right, along the way, and modern developments, but not to actually scrap it all, which they might be wanting to head in with all this, one world government idea. Now, the thing is, look, right, MPs swear an oath that they will act according to law. If parliamentary privilege does not answer to law, and there's no laws they've got to follow, they're purely understanding orders which they can suspend, then why would they swear an oath in that they've got to act according to law? Because there is no law to act to, because it's just standing orders. So either they're lying, or it's a red herring, or they do have to comply with the law and obey it, particularly if they haven't repealed it and they're not amending it, if it's in effect and in force, right? Now, let's say that they can repeal or could repeal the Bill of Rights or the observation of due process, but they haven't, right? And they're not in the process of. So they've got to comply with it and obey it. And this is where my grievance is with Jamie Stone, with the Petitions Committee, right? He is preventing us online in a new form of electronic method, which is to be, it was agreed that it was to be for the same purpose as paper petitions. They're not letting us share the petitions and the whole community sign, right? They're not letting us get the whole community to support it or sign it or see it, right? At all. It's censorship, so that's illegal. They've broken the oath as according to law by observation of due process of law, right? And the 1688 Bill of Rights. So they're not acting according to law at all. They're not acting according to law. Now, so let's go back to this, the leader of... So I just looked in the book, right? They've got whips in Erskine May. Erskine May is not the law of Parliament. It is the opinion of a qualified legal professional who is guiding MPs, right? He's not an MP, he can't vote in Parliament, and he doesn't have any judicial power or authority in Parliament, but he is appointed by the King, and he's got quasi-judicial powers. He can guide and advise MPs and do some executive functions of Parliament, like they can issue writs of privilege under the Parliamentary Papers Act and stuff like that. They're allowed to do certain things like that. But you can argue, and an MP can argue and debate the rules and law of Parliament with the clerk and disagree with them and point it to the House anyway, even if he's going to make a fool of himself. And if the MPs agree with him, then he wins, like in a court, right? Or if the Speaker allows it, it depends what his persuasive argument is with the Speaker or not, right? Because you've got to be able to back yourself up with your claims. If the Speaker's like the judge in Parliament, you've got to argue your case with him and say, well, I've got a right to do this. You got to tell him. But remember, they can vote to suspend their own rules, or whichever rule they want, if they want to. But that doesn't give them the right just to pretend the rules don't exist all the time and kind of go slack and totally disregard them and ignore them. Because then, if you're going to suspend the rule, then either you vote and suspend it or you don't, right? And if you vote to suspend it, then it is duly acknowledged and noted. You don't act as if it doesn't apply when you feel like it. Now I've just looked in Erskine May on the whips. Now it says that the government's whip, the chief whip of the government, the ministers who are who have been given jobs in government, in Parliament, they're not just MPs to represent constituents, the actual government jobs, the ministers, right? They've got a chief whip to make sure the business is all in order. Now it says in the particular volume that I pulled out of Erskine May to check this, because we've got a few different volumes, I just pulled a random one out, right? In that one, it says that the chief whip is synonymous with. It says on the page where I went to, it says is the leader of the House of Commons, right? So in that book, and it probably was something like the 1967 version, or around then, somewhere around the 1967. Give or take a few years, it was the one with the grey cover, right? So when they're referring to the chief whip of the government in Parliament, it says this is the leader of the House of Commons. So he's like leading. That's what I mean. Why have a leader of the House? If you've got a prime minister and you've got a speaker, then why have a leader of the House? And what party is he with? Because if you're in a different party, why would he be? Well, he's the leader of everyone, right? He's just meant to keep it in order. Now, that's significant because the leader of the House of Commons is the person who is signing this policy with the chairman of the Petitions Committee. And they're writing out these policies which they want their helpers, their Parliament staff, to comply with. They're saying, if you're our helpers, our staff, you've got to comply with these rules that we've just knocked together, right? And we're going to make everyone who uses this service online, we're going to make them obey these rules, right? But it's just signed by 2 MPs. Now, if you can show me that the whole House voted on to pass it, but if they vote on to pass it, and that contradicts and goes against standing orders, then they've got a problem. Now, unless they suspended the rules of the standing orders, but they haven't. I don't believe they have suspended the rules of standing orders because they're still there and they're still using them for paper petitions, and they're meant to apply to paper and e-petitions. But they're in this fairy world of fantasy and make-believe where the chief whip thinks that he can tell people whatever he wants to do, like political parties like Keir Starmer, and tell their members what to do. This is when we get into this kind of like what your questions about delegates and representatives and so forth, right? So who's actually in charge of an MP? Right, and so forth. Now, I don't think that they voted to suspend those standing order rules, right? Therefore, petitions, you use powers to summon people and documents in order to understand a petition. to know what it means and says, right? So therefore you can act on it. Now, if the policy of the petitions committee says that don't contact someone, right, then why the fuck have they given them powers to summon people and documents in order to understand petitions, right? Because it's telling you, do not speak to anyone, summon anyone, in order to understand this petition, and primarily do not speak to the person who wrote it. Now, that is insanity. If it was a court, it would be like the judge saying, right, you know, whatever you do, do not contact or write to or speak to the claimant about their case, right? So if the claimant submits a case, don't talk to him about it, don't write a letter to him about it, don't speak to him, don't communicate with him. Now, that has to be absolutely insane and ridiculous. No one in their right mind would do it. And this is when you're getting these chief whippy powers, political parties telling their MPs what to do, and they think they're their servants and they command them, right? And they're getting ahead of themselves, and they believe that they're under these executive company policies, like big companies like YouTube, Facebook, whatever, and it's any reason or no reason, or very big Facebook policy which overreaches the actual law of the country. And they really like this, they love this, because they could just make up what the fuck they want. And it doesn't even have to make sense or be coherent. They can absolutely they think they can do what the bloody hell they want, and they can't. And what they're doing is they're making errors in logic, reason, and sense, right? Because they're in fantasy land. It's wishful thinking, right? They're in the land of wishful thinking, right? And you can't be in a land of wishful thinking when you're meant to be running the country, right? Because you need to be relying on fact, reason, and truth, right? That not fantasy land. Now, this Robert Clark has said, right? Do people not realise that MPs are representatives and not delegates? Well, I actually don't know too much about the word representatives and delegates because we're not usually used to using those terms in British government, right? They're American. Americans have the House of Representatives and Americans have delegates when they're doing political parties, right? Now, I'll go on the Samuel Johnson dictionary because it's my favourite thing to look at because this is meant to be the language of how it was understood at the time when they were writing these things, right? Or started to. And I'll put in representative. We'll type in representative. So Samuel Johnson, right, says for the word representative in we've got 17 in the 1700s. We've got like various dates here, 1775 and so forth. And I don't know what the hell just happened then. Representative, right? Something popped up on the screen, a stupid advert, which has never happened before on this website. Representative, 1773, exhibiting a similitude to bearing the character or power of another. Council of 400 was chosen. Bearing the character or power of another, exhibiting similitude. One exhibiting the likeness of another, one exercising the vicarious power given by another, that by which anything is shown. Right, so MPs, the only representative an MP is on of the people that elected them, because they're the people who put them in, right? The people who voted for them, but they're not actually representing the people that voted for them. They're meant to be representing the constituency, right? Otherwise, why are the rules that you if you've got a problem with Parliament, you can only contact an MP if he's in your constituent because he is your representative, right? If I need to contact an MP and I telephone one, they ask me what my postcode is. Why? Because they might not be representing me. Who is representing me in my area? Iqbal Muhammad is representing me in my area. He is my representative, right? If he was only he's independent, but he's independent. Now, let's say that he was Labour. If he was Labour's representative, then he would only be representing Labour, and you wouldn't be able to telephone him and speak to him. when you rang him up and he said he wouldn't say what's your postcode because I can only speak to you if your postcode is in this area, West Yorkshire, he would say, are you a member of the Labour Party? And I would say, no. And he said, well, I'm sorry, I can't act for you then, right? If he was a representative of the Labour Party, then you would either have to be a member of the Labour Party for him to be able to speak to you and do your casework, or you'd have had to have voted for him. Did you vote for me? Can you show that you voted for me in that election? Well, the rules are not that. If you did not vote in an election, the rules do not exist that you don't have a right to contact your MP or get a surgery meeting with them, right? If you live in an area and that is your MP, and you didn't vote in the election, but when you ring him up, he says, what's your postcode? You say, it's here, and then he says, okay, and then you have a surgery meeting with them, then he is your representative, right? He is your representative, right? So that's representative. Now, I don't actually, delegates is not a word that I use and not familiar with. The word delegate is very American to me, or it seems to be quite, when I hear the word delegate, I immediately think of American politics or American governance, or the word diplomacy, because the word delegates and all this pops up when you've got, diplomats and all this kind of type of stuff, right? So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 entries for delegate. So in the Samuel Johnson Dictionary for delegate in 1773, it says delegate, deputed, sent to act for or represent another. So that's pretty much similar to representative, right? And then we've got the exact same meaning. All right, and we've got some other meanings here. Delegate, a deputy, a commissioner, a vicar, anyone that is sent to act for or represent another. Well, could your lawyer be a delegate then? Could a barrister be a delegate? If you got power of attorney, or if you've got, if you're using COP 10 form to join, merge parties as a single entity or body, so they can act for you in law, things like that. That they're going to be your delegate as well, although we don't use that word for it. Your solicitor, if your solicitor is delegating, if they're going to go into court for you, a deputy commissioner, in law, or there's another meaning here, delegate. In law, delegates are persons delegated or appointed by the King's Commission to sit upon a appeal to him in the Court of Chancery, right? On an appeal to him, right? So that's another meaning for it. To appoint judges to hear and determine a particular case. Well, I just said that myself, so I intuited that. To send upon an embassy, to send away, so to entrust, to commit to another's power, to entrust, to commit to another's power and jurisdiction, to send away, to send upon an embassy, to entrust, to commit on another's power and jurisdiction. Well, this is a thing. So, to appoint judges to hear and determine a particular cause. Right, so for this meaning here, number 3, to entrust, to commit to another's power and jurisdiction, you are absolutely not in any way whatsoever, when an MP gets elected into Parliament, even if he's voted, whoever wins, right, that person is then entrusted and committed to the power of the electorate, of the voters, because he is their representative, right? You are not entrusting or committing power into the Labour Party, right? You're not giving power to the Labour Party. The Labour Party are not a person. They're not a living breathing human being. They cannot be given power. It is merely a club. It is a name. It is a nomination. It is a affiliation. It is an association, right? It is not a delegate, right? The voters, even the ones who won the majority, they do not put their power on behalf of Labour into that person. That person becomes the representative of that entire area and the entire people. He becomes the representative of every person in that area, and I would go so far as to say that also he represents anyone if they've got a problem with that area. Like in the 1661 Tumultuous Petitioning Act, it says that petitions are presented on the area in which the matters arise. Now, this is the thing with Richmond, right? In London, not Richmond in North Yorkshire. In Richmond, in London, there's a Liberal Democrat lady as MP. I've forgotten her name at the moment, it's just slipped my mind, but I rang her up the other day and left a message with her, right? She is the MP for Richmond in London, and that is the area where the National Archives are situated. Therefore, if you've got a problem with the National Archives, Kew Gardens, right, with parliamentary papers and research and documents, right, and that is the problem you've got is with the National Archives, then you really should contact her, because that is the if the issue arises with the National Archives in Richmond between you and them, right? The issue is in Richmond at the National Archives, and that MP is responsible for issues of Richmond at the National Archives, and you should be able to contact them over that matter, right? Even if you're not born from Richmond, right? If you are not born from Richmond, if you don't live there, so what? Your problem is concerning something in Richmond, right? And that MP is responsible for Richmond. Now, I haven't spoken to one secretary of MPs that's been able to give me the rules for contacting MPs or where they're written down, right? I don't see them in standing orders. I typed in surgery into standing orders. I didn't find it in there, the word surgery. And I don't know if the word surgery is in Erskine May, but I'm not going to go look for that now. But if you definitely live in an area, they're your representative. But they're also the representatives for any matter which arises or occurs in that area, really, right? If it's governmental, parliamentary, right? Now, so this is the thing. You can't. The Labour Party cannot say that if you aren't a member of that party and if you did not vote for them, you don't have a right of surgery and audience with the MP because they represent all the people of that area, right? And you do have a right to surgery. So the MP is the representative of everyone in that area and anyone who has a problem in that area, right? And that is absolutely clear. Now, as for Parliament itself, right? Now, these whips, they're not, they're not ancient like Magna Carta, these whips. They're not ancient even, I don't know if they're ancient like the Bill of Rights either. They, according to information on the internet in history, they actually started in extremely small minority parties, mainly Irish ones, right? Because to make sure that MPs did what the very small parties to stick to what they're doing because they were quite small. They absolutely necessitate. If you only got 3 or 4 members, like Reform UK now are a very small party, right? They need to stick together. If you're a very big party, it doesn't really matter so much if some of your MPs have one opinion than the other because it's a huge big party, right? And this was adopted, and it only became the custom of Parliament, I think, sort of, I'll have to look at the date, right? I'll have to look at the date. They've adopted it into the customs and the customs and traditions of Parliament, right? The traditions and customs of Parliament. It's not in standing orders, though. The word whip does not appear in standing orders. Now, according to Erskine May that I read, it says that the chief whip of the Commons, it's saying that it's meant to be synonymous with Leader of the House of Commons, right? So it's having a Leader of the House of Commons to make sure that all the general business gets put through in proper order. Although, like, when they're having debates, the Speaker calls order, not the chief whip, right? But the Speaker is not, while people are speaking in debate and making orders in the business of the House in front of the House, but the Speaker is not in the corridors or in the voting booths and knocking around in the rest of the building when other procedures and processes are being conveyed, right? And you see the Whig Party. The government, the ministers, originally before political parties, was the government, right? The government versus the opposition. Now, the opposition was everyone else who was not ministers, everyone else who were not appointed with a job in government, right? That was how it was. And if you look at the Peaky Blinders television series, when they have Parliament in there, they've got the layout of it different. They have them all facing the front, right? Now, obviously, as they started to have political parties, then they changed the format of it and so forth, and you have them on left and right and etc. And like I said, the political parties didn't have whips, it was the minority parties, but it's something where the power of the big parties has managed to take over, and then you've got the situation now where they're being commanded what to do. Now, this is the thing. If you stand as an independent and get elected, they voted for you. They wanted you in Parliament, right? Because they believed in you and your powers and your opinion, and they trusted you, right? And they thought you were up for the job and that you were knowledgeable and trustworthy, right? To be the representative of the people, right? Now, that's what you want. That's what you want, someone who's going to represent the people, even if they're a member of a party, because generally, if people aren't that bothered about what's happening in politics or the world, then it doesn't matter. But when you get a situation where they are, or they want to be, then the majority is meant to have precedent, right? So if they make their opinions voiced, known, and it takes a majority, then the MP, he should be representing the majority, right? And all the people who voted for him, right, might not be bothered about a particular issue. If everyone who voted for the MP elected him, but they might not be bothered about, the environment or whatever, farming, then there might be lots of people who are, and if all the farmers are, and there's more people bothered about, this or that in farming, then they are taking the initiative and they're taking possession of a majority for that area. And that's really how it should be. If not, then he's not representing what the people of the area, he isn't representing the people of the area, what the majority of the people of the area want, right? But then again, you might have an issue where, I don't know, something might affect a small number of people and other people might have an opinion on it, but it might not affect them. And is that fair or not? Well, I don't know, but this is when you get your evidence out and you've got to make a strong case and so forth. Because debates don't always go on numbers, but when they're voting legislation through, it goes on numbers. They have their committee meetings, they have their debates, they look at the evidence, but the evidence doesn't dictate whether the bill gets put through or not. The bill gets put through or not on votes, right? And whenever you submit petitions to Parliament, it's called votes and proceedings, right? It gets put down in the votes and proceedings, and making and changing laws at the end of the day goes on numbers. It doesn't go on evidence, fact, or truth. It goes on numbers of MPs' votes. So if it goes on electoral power, then surely the MP is accountable to the majority of their electorate. Now, if you can tell me where it's written down that they're not, then fair enough. But they're not representing all of the people of that area. If not, you know. So, and remember, these whips, it's relatively more modern, right? Particularly for the main big parties. And this is the thing. When you've got these main big parties, right? If you're going to stand for Labour, and if you're going to stand for Conservative Party, they've already got big followings, and when they've already got big followings, you're guaranteed that you're going to get the vote of that party because they want that party. Or if you're going to stand for, Labour or Conservative. Now, this is where it's almost like being me up, Scotty, right? If you're in an area it's a working class area and they've got Labour voters in the majority, and this is like when, Andrew Bridgen goes to meet David Cameron, and David Cameron apparently says to Andrew Bridgen, you'll never win the seat in North Leicestershire and we're not going to give you any money, right? This is what Andrew Bridgen said, but yet he went and did win it, right? This is the thing. Now, if you put on the red jacket and say, I'm going to stand for the Red Party, and all those people are going to just vote for you, they're not voting for you, they're voting for the jacket that you put on. But they can't vote for the jacket unless someone puts it on, right? If you got a red jacket on the floor, right, you cannot vote for it unless you put it on a shop dummy or a mannequin, right? If you have a stage with candidates, right, and then you put a shop dummy mannequin on with a red jacket, right, and say this is the Labour candidate, and everyone writes it down on the paper, you vote for a dummy, because it's not a person, it's a shop dummy with a red jacket on, right? And it's not going to be any use for you in Parliament, right? Unless it's an android or, Dr. Philopappus or whatever, right? A jacket is a inanimate object. It is a piece of clothing. You can't vote for a jacket, right? It has to be a person who wears a jacket. Now, if you want to put the magic jacket on, which is like the genie rubbing the lamp and say, poof, hey presto, I just got elected into Parliament, then what you're doing is you're giving your soul to that party telling you what to do and to these whips, rather than if you stand independent and people vote for you, then they voted for you and you are their representative. But when they vote for the person who puts the red Labour jacket on, they're still the representative of everyone. They're everyone's representative in the area. They've got to be by law. You're not disqualified from surgery with them, or else you couldn't have surgery with them, right? And this is the thing. So, you must be like taking heroin or something, or I'll do anything to get on TV, like eat a tin of fucking, get in a bath of baked beans or whatever, right? This is the thing. This is why it's ridiculous. Now, if you are in Parliament and if you're confident that your voters, the majority, are always going to agree with you and everything, then, you're all right. But when you're in Parliament in times of conflict and dispute, when other people decide that they've got an opinion, or they decide that, the government are doing certain things that they don't want them to do, and yet a particular MP got voted in, but then large numbers of people are deciding to engage with their MP, their representative, and tell them not to do that, then you've got a problem, right? Because you've got conflicts of interest, and you cannot ignore your people, right? Because if you do, you're not their representative anymore, right? You're not the representative of the party. You're the representative of everyone who has a legal right to be represented. And that is just how it is. And this is tough shit to these political parties, right? They're spending all this money and they're getting all these campaigns and they're doing all this flashy stuff in order to get people into Parliament, right? So, because the party wants it to, but if political parties cannot believe in democracy because they don't want to. They're not wanting candidates to stand to get elected to represent the people. They're wanting candidates to stand to represent the party's interests, not the electors. Now, if they can convince a majority of the electors that what they want to do is the right thing to do, then fair enough. But this is the thing, and this is the whole thing with Nigel Farage. He's like the world's, he's like the suitcase salesman. He's like the world rep. He's like Nick Clegg, Facebook global president. Nigel Farage is like the man with his house in his suitcase. He's like the man who sold the world. This is Nigel Farage. Farage is like the man who sold the world. He's trying to sell politics, not just to Clacton-on-Sea. Farage is meant to be the representative of Clacton-on-Sea. I don't even think he's not a minister. I don't think I know if he's on any committees or not. He represents Clacton-on-Sea, right? He's got a surgery. He's meant to have a surgery in Clacton-on-Sea. He's not a minister. He doesn't minister the business of the government to the country, like a bishop or whatever, for the government. He's not ministering. He's not the government. He doesn't minister the business of government to England. And he shouldn't be doing to the world. He is a local MP. And he represents Clacton-on-Sea, right? And that's his surgery. He doesn't minister governmental law. So what the fuck's he doing on Australia on the news? I don't know. He's not dedicated to ministering Clacton-on-Sea or turning up in Parliament to vote for them. He's a little bit like George Galloway wanted to, his fantasy job is to be, the Minister for Foreign Affairs, right? But like, or like a subcategory of like, the Middle East. George Galloway wants to be the Minister for the Middle East, right? Farage wants to be the man who sold he's selling reform to the world. But that surely is illegal because it's a British party. It's only allowed to advertise and promote and run in England, right, to, Clacton-on-Sea, and he's got, Reform can have candidates in other areas, but he's selling Reform to the whole world, like as if he's trying to sell the one world government and tell other countries what to do and what not to do, like the Australian government, or the Canadian government when they're doing all these insane acts of law, like you can't go on your computer without ID and all this ridiculous stuff like that, things that we've taken for granted and been quite normal activities. So Farage is, he might as well have been on Jeff Bezos' spaceship. I'm quite surprised he wasn't queuing up to get on Jeff Bezos' spaceship or with, Bill Shatner, Here's Nigel Farage broadcasting from I'm in space with Bill Shatner and Jeff Bezos. That's what Nigel Farage is heading for. I'm speaking to you from Elon Musk's satellite or whatever. Well, what's that got to do with Clacton-on-Sea? Oh, I'm over Clacton-on-Sea now. Exactly. I'm exactly over Clacton-on-Sea. So does that class me within Clacton-on-Sea airspace or not? I don't know. But, maybe you could take a pee on people on Clacton-on-Sea from space, Maybe, like, people would be kind of, like, standing out on the doorstep, holding pans out. Maybe they're panning for gold. If you catch a couple of drops of Nigel Farage's pee from, Elon Musk's satellite, maybe you can, maybe you win a prize or something, I don't know. But it's, these people, you see, now you've got David Davis MP. If you ring David Davis MP up, he'll say, what's postcode? Oh, it's not in North Yorkshire, so, East Yorkshire, so I can't speak to you. But then he's joined Big Brother Watch and he's turning up at all these events and speaking and answering questions to people. Are they not your constituents? Are you David Davis MP or not? And then you've got Sian Berry as well, who's doing that as well. I'm opposing digital ID, and now I'm outside number 10 delivering a petition with Big Brother Watch, but they're not my, Silky Carlo's not my constituent, why am I representing with her? They're blurring the boundaries, and they're doing this on Facebook. They want to have their cake and eat it. This is what they're doing now. They want to have their cake and eat it. They want to have their rules for their surgery and say, I can't talk to you, speak to them because face ain't listening if you're not from, Clacton-on-Sea or whatever. And then they're going on Facebook and talking to everyone. And they want everyone to listen to them as well. They want everyone to listen to what they're saying and take their advice and opinion and even get promo all around the country, which will make them look very, nice little good little MP with gold stars, and haven't done very well, and their local area will see that, everyone likes them and they'll vote for them again. But what's Sian Berry doing on a ferry? Sian Berry on a ferry, saving dolphins, but it might not be in her area, but then if her area sees it, then they might vote for her next year. Was that a bit of extra publicity? This is the thing. They're going around all these radio stations and doing all these photo shoots. It's actually all publicity now, all the time. They're on a constant promo. They're on a 365 day a year promo tour, which is advertising them and their work and what they're doing, and they want to be rewarded for it. But it's like a constant advertisement. An MP in Hampshire, there's nothing wrong with them being in the Hampshire news if they're doing something for their electorate. But why should they be in the national news? What's that got to do with the whole country? And this is where, I know that some of the big newspapers do pick up local stories, but this is when you end up with the BBC News with Nigel Farage's name going across the bottom of the fucking screen. Donald Trump, he's done this or that. It's Nigel Farage says, I like chocolate milkshake, coming across the bottom of the fucking screen like Elon Musk tweets. On the international BBC News, right? Why is God does not live by bread alone, but every word and breath of the mouth of God, every word and breath of the mouth of Nigel Farage, Nigel Farage, he's having a pint in, Bristol, comes across the bottom of the fucking screen on the BBC International News. Nigel Farage in the pub in Bristol says, Bayek, that's a nice pint, Nigel Farage is on holiday in Fiji, he just went into the water and said, oh, that's nice and warm, it's like constant fucking feed, and they're getting all this publicity 365 days a year, and this is the thing on their MP page. Once you got elected, you're the MP then, right? You're not doing your election campaign. The election campaign's over, right? Yeah, they've got all the election campaign material on there. It says in the 2007 Control of Advertisements, take it down after 14 days, right? That's in that act. Or the council can take it down. Magazines, are finished. The radio announcement is over. The radio announcement is spoken and then it's gone. Radio silence, you don't hear another radio advert until the next election campaign. This is the thing. But now it's like a 365-day promo campaign on their Facebook page. But they've got it linked to they've got it declared as their main parliament, on their main parliament contact. So the House of Commons is advertising private companies, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, and so forth, which is making these platform owners billions, and then they're sitting next to Trump, smiling, and Mark Zuckerberg's going, "Oh, didn't I do well? I've just made 80 billion or whatever. Wow, really good." Well, no, Parliament have been advertising your website to everyone, right? For free, and the BBC, you got free advertising from public service broadcasting, from the license fee payer, and from the taxpayer, right? Paid for your advertising on the Parliament website, right? A phone number does not advertise a private company, not in England, and Parliament's email address does not advertise a private company, neither does the address, but they suddenly got into the business of advertising these American and Chinese big platforms. And when they're advertising these in big American platforms, they're also advertising their election campaign all year. And the Electoral Commission aren't doing anything at all about it. And added to that, you've got Nigel Farage with his Talking Pints programme that got him into Parliament, which I never had an issue with reform. I didn't have an issue with Reform UK. And if I hadn't have read the election law, like the Representation of the People Act, I would never have called them out on it, I wouldn't have had anything, to dispute about Farage or Tice or anyone, But it can't be fair. And then you got Graham Moore. The Royal Mail didn't deliver all his flyers, when he's supposed to get one flyer delivered free to every elector. They didn't deliver his flyers. That should have called that election void. But apparently, they're just calling it out on the ticket counting. They want a recount. But yet, it's more important that his flyers didn't get delivered than the recount, right? Because if they didn't get his flyers and people weren't informed that they could vote for him, what was the point in turning up and holding the ballot? And what was the point in counting the tickets, right? So it's kind of ridiculous. So going back to Parliament and going back to, representatives, do people not realise that all MPs are representatives and not delegates, so vote the way their party wants? Well, that's erroneous. That is an erroneous sentence. So coming right back to the start to Robert Clark's comment, Robert Clark is in error. He's in a error of sentence, grammar and meaning, right? Because he's written, this is nonsensical. He's put, might not be nonsensical because it's in English, so it makes some sort of sense, but it's erroneous. Do people not realise that all MPs are representatives? So up to that point is all right. But then when he's put the word and, no delegates are not delegates, so vote the way their party wants. Well, no, this is an erroneous claim. This is an erroneous paragraph, Robert Clark, right? The word representative in the dictionary, the original meaning of the word representative and delegate is, for these purposes, more or less synonymous. It is interchangeable. It is similar enough that MP, whether they're a representative or a delegate, in the sense of the general meaning of the term, in that context of the relationship. The question is, what is the relationship between the voters in an area, the electors in an area, their MP, and a political party? That's the question. So in the context of voters, their MP, and their political party, in that context, what is the usage and meaning of the words delegate and representative? Well, in my opinion, from reading the dictionary, it's in that context. Delegate is synonymous with representative. They're interchangeable for the purposes of the scope of that question, right? Because the fact is that the MP is the representative of the people. So they wouldn't vote the way that the party wants at all, because they're not the representative of the party, right? Now, does that mean that they delegated anything from the party? Well, this is the thing, right? What is the relationship of the MP with the party? And the relationship is this. The party helped to make the MP popular, right? The party assisted to get the MP elected and voted in because they collected or influenced electors, or a large number of electors, enough electors, to choose the MP as the electors, not the party's representative, over other candidates, right? The party was able to assist a particular person to get more electors to say that we want this person as our electors representative rather than someone else, right? And that is it. The party is an assistant, right? Now, lots of people might like that party and agree with that party on loads of points, but loads of people might not. And it depends on if the other people who, when a majority elect a person and he wins and becomes the representative of everyone. He's not the representative of Labour, because the Labour Party, the Labour Party itself does not constitute itself out of persons of an electoral area only. The Labour Party is a body of people from all around England. A body of people all around England don't have a right to surgery with that person who just got elected, right? So they don't represent the whole of Labour Party. They can only represent people who voted for Labour in their electoral area, additionally and inclusive as well of everyone else in that area, right? So this is the thing. Now, is any power, when the MP goes into Parliament, right, this is the thing. I really don't know. You need someone in the House of Commons to keep the order of business, what's on the schedule and timetable, right? Additionally, a leader of the House of Commons who can keep order, when it's not in front of the Speaker and the Speaker's controlling who can speak, in the session, because the Speaker's not walking around in the corridors or in the booths and knocking around other places, right? So that is, the leader of the House of Commons, right? And, arranging, committees and so forth. But obviously, the majority of the government who get into power in the government and so forth, this is the thing. I don't like this whole kind of like how they decide who's in charge of the House of Commons and who are the ministers. And the Speaker's quite simple. They vote for the Speaker, so it could be anyone, right? They're meant to do a vote between all MPs and choose who the Speaker's going to be, and then a couple of them grab hold of him, right? Put him in the chair, right? That's straightforward. Now, this kind of like, hung Parliament and all this tosh, I don't buy it. I think, my opinion is this. I think it's a con. I think it's a trick, a deception, all the bullshit. People go, we have to vote for Labour or the Tories, or, you can't get any business through government. Well, you might not want to get business through the government. At the current moment in time, a lot of people don't want the government to do any business, particularly all this digital ID business. They only want very, very extremely brilliant, good ideas through that, you can persuade and convince MPs to support with very strong arguments. So why else would they want to support it and put it through? You've got to be persuasive, right? And this is the thing. If you had complete and total Parliament of 850 or 650, whatever it is, MPs, right, and they were all independent, and well, how do you choose a prime? Well, if they can choose a Speaker, they can choose a Prime Minister. If you can choose a Speaker, you can choose a Prime Minister, surely. And then he can choose a Cabinet, surely. He can say, right, you're my Secretary of State, or this or that, or whatever, right? Or you could even have a secret fucking ballot for it. Who cares how the fuck you do it? What if we don't agree on anything? Well, I thought these were the right honourable people who, are meant to be respectable and get along with each other, and the model standard of citizenship. Everyone's supposed to be like them and behave like them and copy their conduct and everything like that, right? So it's like they're telling us that we're the problem, that everyone's kicking off on protesting, or everyone's stealing or robbing or breaking into houses or stealing cars or coming over in boats or apparently we're all unruly, we're not worthy, we're all misbehaved, and we need the police and digital ID and security to govern us all, right? We're not worthy of, we're not trustworthy to, you can't even have a family bring up their own kids, you can't even trust parents to bring up their kids properly, right? Apparently, you can't even have a school without, security fences around it, it's a miracle that I went to school, If you can't say that, you got to vote for a political party because otherwise you can't have a government or it won't work, well, that's a lie. If you all vote for independent MPs, right, and if they could not come to civil agreements and negotiations into who is going to be on the government, then they're not worthy to be MPs because they're meant to be, respectable, right, honourable and well behaved. But apparently, they need to be whipped. They need to have a red jacket. If you've got a magic red jacket, is it some sort of behaviour jacket? Is it like straight jacket? Maybe it's a straight jacket. That's the thing. Maybe it's a straight jacket. Maybe if we put them all in straight jackets, then they'll all get on with each other, put them on straight jackets, like a lunatic asylum, right? Now we're all behaving, we can't flail around or whatever, sit down, stand up, pick up the mace and try and walk out with it, pick up the gold mace out of Parliament and walk out with it, That guy probably needs a straight jacket on, didn't he, right? So it's ridiculous now. If you say, well, we don't necessarily agree on anything, fuck me, what are you there for? Debate it. Argue it. Well, none of them are turning up for debates. Well, they obviously don't give a fuck then, do they? They're not representing their people, are they? Matt Hancock's in the fucking jungle, doing jungle gym or whatever he's doing. Nigel Farage is in Australia on the news. He's not in Clacton-on-Sea giving surgery. They're there to debate what the laws should and should not be and argue strong cases and put evidence down. Do some work. There's never been as many members of the House of Lords, ever. They're like spare pricks in a brothel. How many members of the House of Lords does it take to change a light bulb? There's never been as many members of the House of Lords, and they've never had as little work to do. They don't have to have judicial hearings or hear appeal cases from the public anymore. They don't even have they've got the Ombudsman to take up all the petitions of Parliament. God knows how they were doing it when there was 800,000 petitions, every session being put through, and then it went down to 80 or something. They were getting hundreds of thousands of petitions of grievance. And now they only want to do their own political party business. They've been spoiled so that they've pushed they've bullied the public out of the chamber, out of Parliament, out of their business out, and then they've got these gangs, these political parties, and they said, right, we're going to get all this stuff through that we want, which is not necessarily what the people want. So it's like a gang, a mob. It's like a gangster mob, and this is the problem. You're not meant to actually have whips for parties because they only came in through minority parties, right? So it's not even really it's not a long, ancient established tradition. It's only a relatively, early modern history development in customs and traditions of Parliament. It's not even in the standing orders. If there's no standing order for it, then it's not actually a law of Parliament. It's only, a modern practice, custom and procedure, right? Because put it this way. What if, right, which this can happen, what if independent MPs did get elected? What if independent MPs did get elected? And don't give me all that hung Parliament tosh, right? What whips would you have? Well, you wouldn't have whips. Because if you did get independent MPs elected, and if they did agree to form some sort of government or agreement like coalition parties agree to do certain things, you wouldn't have any whips. So you don't have them. Or they might appoint someone on behalf of the government to be the leader of the House and the whip, but then he's the whip of a mixed cabinet, right? It's not in the standing orders to have a... Now, if you're looking at Erskine May, well, you go, look, it says here the whips. Well, we need someone to make sure that, when we're, running the fucking polling booths and the corridors and stuff, someone keeps everyone in order, right? What the fuck has that got to do with what party you were or not, or are not a member of, or which way you're going to vote, right? It just means that people get to the booths and make sure that people vote when it's the right time, or this or that, or in the right places where they need to be when there's a debate on and stuff like that, and then obviously when they're in front of the speaker. So it's red. It's all red herringness. It's all red herrings. It's all Red Bull. It's like fucking. It's just like, I got a yellow jacket and you got a red jacket, Tosh, right? And this is the thing. At the moment, people are very concerned about what the government is doing. So it should be extremely difficult to get any business through Parliament or any legislation. But the way they're doing it is that it's inevitable. Labour are putting these bills through, and it's like, we've set a fucking, there's like the Rolling Stones, we've set this rolling down a hill, and it's fucking inevitable because it's a Labour policy, so, it's going to happen whether you like it or not, right? Unless, a couple of MPs from other parties manage to, just, divert it or kick it aside, it's going to roll down the hill one way or another, right? Well, that's not actually the case. The case should be that, there are these bills, and it should be extremely difficult to try and get them through and put a case for them, particularly when there's loads of people kicking off about it. But apparently there's this guy called Tony Blair, who ain't even a fucking MP anymore. He's like, fuck knows what he is, a statesman. He's, he's in all kinds of occult gangs, groups, organisations, G30, G40 cities, the World Health Organisation, World Economic Forum. What isn't he a member of, right? He's in these foreign groups, foreign bodies, but he's also a member of the Labour Party, right? And he instigated a lot of these agendas, right? Yeah, so are the Labour Party doing what, Tony Blair and these foreign entities want, which is what I've said to, Cheyenne Berry. Yet the Labour Party, women, have got the absolute cheek and disgusting nerve to dare to say in an absolutely outstanding petition, which really challenged their party, the Labour Party, 3 million signatures, which isn't easy to achieve, Michael Westwood's petition. One of the Labour women dared, I think it was a Labour woman, she dared to say, there's been loads of foreign interference in this petition, they've been sharing it and helping, when the Labour Party, their agenda doesn't come from British towns, villages, fields, workhouses, voters and people. It comes from a man called Tony Blair, a load of his pals, Sadiq Khan, and international meetings they're having with, fucking Spectre in, the WHO, World Health Organisation, foreigners who think they know what's better for the planet, and then they're putting these policies through in Parliament. Now, if that ain't foreign interference with British government, what the fuck is? This is the thing. So, if that ain't fucking treasonous, why aren't MI5 doing something about this, Next thing they'll be giving a fucking contract to make fucking 10 million drones, to invade Russia on behalf of Ukraine, and we'll be paying for them, and then after they've done that, they'll probably turn them on us, fuck knows. This is the thing. But how they've managed to do all these things is only through these foreign platform policies, which have come from overseas. They've been taking away all our privacy. Tony Blair is the deceiver. He's like, we've got freedom of information, but it only means the government. No, actually, the truth is I'm a complete and totally compulsive liar. When I say up, I mean down. When I say sunny, it's fucking raining and thundering, right? When I say left, I mean fucking right. I'm Tony Blair, the compulsive liar and deceiver, the devil himself. When I say, European Convention of Human Rights, right to privacy, what I mean is, Big Brother program, let's perv in everyone's fucking house and their private business. You know, when I say, you know, when the government rejects digital ID, then I say, well, everyone fucking sign up to Facebook and create a digital identity. You know, when I say everyone's got a right to privacy, we'll say, well, the police will ask you, you know, what every fucking question under the sun. You know, the police have a wanting to fucking have a look inside your arsehole to see what fucking condition it's in. You know, after they fucked you up it. This is the thing, you know, and that's a joke, by the way, but, you know, their forms like, oh, what religion you are, you know, what sex are you, you know, are you being gender bending, you know, what question aren't they asking you, are you married, single, you know, what is this? This is a date, it's like some sort of dating site. The questions, why is it the questions that the police ask you, like when on complaints form now, are like the same questions that you put down on speed dating? You know, oh, what religion are you? You know, what's your sexual orientation? You know, are you married or single? These are dating questions that you have on dating sites. You know, this is the thing. There's no immediate social need for it. Oh, there's clearly an ulterior motive. What's that got to do with, you know, if you got a complaint about the police that you're manhandled, why does it matter what sexuality you are, as long as you weren't sexually assaulted, you know, unless you didn't have some sort of lesbian affair with a lot of police officers, then it might matter what your sexuality is, but obviously isn't it self-evident in the act? If you had a sexual encounter with a lot of police officers or all lesbians, then isn't it self-evident in the evidence? So I have evidence here to reason to believe that, you know, you're bisexual. You know, isn't that the evidence itself presents? You know, what I'd have to ask you. You know, I don't really know where these questions came from, but this is the part of the whole Tony Blair mastermind. Whatever Tony Blair says, if Tony Blair says black, he means white, right? This is the thing. These are his mechanisms of implementation all through these government bodies, departments, agencies. He spilled the beans already on it. You know, it's like, oh, I'm taking over the world and we're going to have one world government. And Starmer's even now called it one gov. So, you know, this is the thing. This is ridiculous. And I've gone